It's rare that I find myself plunging headfirst into open world experiences like I did with last year's surprise hit, Dying Light. Its fluent combination of simple but satisfying combat and graceful parkour made for an undeniably awesome time. That is, until the game's final moments came into fruition. What had until then been an ever-increasing test of my newfound skills and abilities ostensibly boiled down to an uninspired QuickTime sequence that felt as lazy as it did boring. Boss battles are a staple of video game design, offering both a challenge for the player to utilize newly acquired weapons and capabilities, and also can provide pensive moments for the game's narrative to advance. These encounters don't even necessarily need to be structured around combat either, and can instead be a battle of wits and intelligence, or maybe just be a complete and utter mindfuck. As early as 1975, with the release of D&D on Plato home computer systems, players have been able to lay waste to formidable enemies with expansive health bars and intimidating size. The Golden Dragon in D&D would be the first of countless encounters that stood separate to the vanilla gameplay. These adversaries would require all of the player's skills and determination to defeat, and as such would often be the most memorable moments in the entire game. Over the next 2 decades, the design and purpose of these battles would alter greatly depending on which genre they appeared in. Some would be as simple as making it to the top of a level, or purely acting as a barrier the player would have to get past. Entire franchises would eventually be built upon the very concept of boss battles, a notion that still exists today. But in recent years, it's become increasingly apparent that boss battles feel like an arbitrary necessity to game developers, as these encounters have become progressively blander and lazier, even appearing in instances that otherwise would be reserved for vital plot progression. Take Batman Arkham Asylum's final encounter with longtime rival the Joker. After constantly taunting him from the shadows for the duration of the adventure, the Joker is suddenly transformed into a muscular juggernaut who you must then take down, all the while mindlessly wading through waves of enemies. While adequate from a design point of view, this boss battle is entirely contradictory to the themes of Batman's narrative. The Joker is never intimidating or dangerous because of the physical threat he poses, and is instead a villain almost entirely feared for his psychotic brand of psychological terror. This fight only exists because simply knocking the Joker out cold with one punch wouldn't really have made for an exciting climax. The thing about boss battles is that when they fail to serve the purpose of the story and are instead a means to an end in terms of artificially advancing the game, they can be highly detrimental to both a game's pacing and to its thematic consistency. Though a boss battle that is entirely in service of providing a fun gameplay moment is equally as important, balance, such as it is in all aspects of design, is essential to a boss battle. The way that developers can foreshadow and introduce the player to the boss is also one of the more effective methods of world building, as these seemingly insurmountable foes can often embody the hostility of an entire environment, and as such serve as living manifestations of the struggle the player must overcome. Sticking with the Batman Arkham series, the very next installment in Rocksteady's depiction of the Dark Knight included one of the more unique boss encounters in recent memory. Your chilling showdown with Dr. Freeze requires you to use a different method of attack each time you approach, meaning that every time you attack him you have to alter your strategy, or else he will remember your previous pattern and in turn turn your attacks against you. While being an extremely fun battle in its own right, this is also highly emblematic of both characters' personalities, providing a perfect convergence between story and gameplay. Though encounters such as these are becoming increasingly rare, it seems with the proliferation of QuickTime sequences in the mid-2000s came a school of thought that placing button prompts on the screen would somehow be an adequate substitute for actual gameplay. Over the past few years, I've been berated with an increasingly dull series of downright awful boss battles that, at least for me, validate that QuickTime sequences have no place in instances that otherwise would be improved with dynamic gameplay or cathartic plot points. Though admittedly, some franchises know the appropriate way to utilize such sequences. That's not to say that since video games made the jump to 3D, that boss battles have all but died. On the contrary, some of the most memorable bosses in history have been from games released in the past decade. I just wanted to bring into question where boss battles as a whole are heading as we move forward. Will they provide a healthy mix between familiar and enigmatic challenge, or simply be watered down and only exist because the designer thinks the player expects them? But let me know in the comments below what your favourite or absolute worst boss battles are, and if you agree with the points made in this video. Do you like QuickTime events? Do you hate them? I'd love to know. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and until next time, see ya.